We're live. All right, we're live. All right, so having done that, I am now going to press all the record buttons, count to 3, and then press the intro music. Here we go. Learning as we go. The system is working. I'm so thrilled. Here we go. 1.
Recording in progress.
2.
It's a trap! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Evil genius!
Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time.
I have not begun to project my anger onto you.
Okay, terrific.
Flawless victory.
Okay. None of you know this. But I pressed all the buttons right this time. We did it. We can celebrate. I'm so thrilled. Hi. How are you? What's going on? How have things been? Are you surviving wherever it is you're surviving? I hope you are. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the Writers Chat for July the 21st. Man, July is flying by. Wasn't it just like the 4th and fireworks trauma day like recently? It's really nice to be here. It's really nice to have you. Thanks for being here. Let's have a proper intro. Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, writers, makers, doers, creatives, soap enthusiasts, dancers, high-class hoes, low-class hoes, anybody who, makes baskets, enthusiasts without socks, people who have those little tattoos right in the middle of their sternums, enjoyers of combat sports, enjoyers of non-combat sports, anybody who can explain to me the rules of cricket, the entire population of the country of San Marino, for I am your 110th best viewed stream. I did check that out. Screenwriters, filmmakers, cinematographers, YouTubers, beat makers, dancers, groovers, anybody who slides into DMs, and most importantly, the comrades. Hey. Through no fault of my own, I continue to be John Adamus, the writer next door, and it is my pleasure to spend the next few hours with you here, talking writing, talking publishing, talking editing, talking about how to help you become the sort of writer you've always wanted to be. And I hope I can do that. If this is the first time you're checking this out, first of all, thank you for putting me in your ears and now streaming across multiple platforms, putting me in your face. Is that how I want to say that? Yeah, we're going to go with that. Putting me in your face. That's sure. Well, yeah, okay. And if this is the first time you're checking out, here's how this happens. Since the last time we've connected across all the different reaches of social media, I've been wrangling up questions. I've got a dozen here about all different kinds of writing things and editing things and publishing things, and it is my absolute sheer joy, one of my only sheer joys in life, to bring you some answers, as well as answer the questions of those people in chat. Hey, look, it's the Zoom chat. Zoom, hi. And it's the Twitch chat. Hi. And it's the YouTube chat. Hi. I hope everybody has a good time. Get comfy. Here we go. Let's begin with question 1. A technical one, a writing one. I love these. John, what is central mystery structure and when does it get used? Well, not surprisingly, central mystery structure gets used in mysteries. It doesn't only get used there, but it's sort of a thing. So central mystery structure says the following things. The biggest question of the plot, the biggest danger, the biggest source of story is going to be a mystery. And by mystery, they mean literally something unknown will become known. Whether that's who killed the guy, who robbed the bank, who stole this, who has that, who cheated on who, or what happened, or how did this happen. There's some question, some unknown thing occurred or has occurred or will occur, or somebody did something. There's an unknown that will be answered over the course of the story, generally. And when I say generally, I mean like 90-ish% of the time, directly because of the actions the protagonist or protagonists take. Sometimes little bits of it are going to be explained through other things, but the vast, vast, vast majority is going to be explained by the protagonist doing stuff. They're going to find clues. They're going to figure things out. They're going to piece 1 + 1 + 1 and get 3. They're going to, oh my God, I'm being hosted. It is so delightful to be hosted. Thank you I really should fix that graphic though. Thank you ever so much. It honestly means the world to me, because I just assume I'm doing this and talking to the cats. So thanks. It's great to see you. Back to central mystery structure. Central mystery structure. So the plot's driven by the characters' actions, which means characters must display everybody's favorite capital A word, agency. And you use central mystery structure when you're building a mystery, when you're creating suspense around your story, when there's an unknown and you're trying to solve it. You can use the same sort of structure, not for an A plot, when you're doing a B plot. Of course, though, the smaller your plot, the less central the mystery structure is going to be, because it'll be less central because it's a B plot. But the idea itself is this. Generally, the antagonist did a thing, or will do a thing, or is planning to do a thing. The antagonist is at the heart of the story. And solving that, figuring out who the antagonist is, figuring out what they did, figuring the mystery out, is going to be broken up into clues. So that we have this thing, plus that thing, plus this thing, plus that thing, or however many things. Though we'll get to in a minute, we'll talk about why you don't want like a ton of them. But you break it into pieces. And each piece, when combined, lead to the inevitable conclusion that we have to confront our antagonist. Clue plus clue plus clue plus clue, however many clues, does not directly mean, or does not always directly mean, that, oh, Bob did it. Bob's the guilty one. Get Bob. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Because some writers want to be, I should get a mysterious sound effect. Mysterious. They want to draw it out. They want to be artsy. They want to delay some of this stuff, and that's fine. Sometimes it's a little bit much. Sometimes they're a little bit extra. Sometimes they've gone too far with it, when instead they should just get right to the point. But sometimes it works, and it comes down on an individual case-by-case basis. But you want your clues to lead towards the climax of the story more so than the direct solution of the mystery. Yeah, on some level, you're still going to have to solve the mystery with the clues. But we're driving to the climax because the climax is the confrontation. It's the moment where the detective, I've gathered all of you here today to tell you who the murderer was. There's your climax. Or it could be the rainy rooftop chase of the killer. Or it could be the confrontation of the old man at the bridge and the German waterfall. You just want to lead to the climax, because invariably the person engaging with the protagonist during the climax is the guilty party. You wouldn't have a not guilty character show up to the climax for no reason. Ted, why are you here? Well, because Bob's the killer, but I'm a goon. Oh, okay. Ultimately, though, we still have to confront Bob. We use this structure to drive towards climax, to give the characters something to do, to develop agency. And the reason we don't want like a bajillion clues is because while it keeps demonstrating agency every time we get a clue, figure it out, deal with the consequences of the first clue, and then in the process find the next clue. But we don't want to do that over and over and over again, because even though we will be advancing some kind of story in some kind of direction that way, it falls into a pattern and it starts to kind of lull the reader. Big yawn, big stretch. Oh my God, how many clues is it going to take before we move the story forward, generally with an action beat or with some dialogue or with some B plot, and just kind of break things up and catch us off guard again and keep us engaged? If we delay that, if we just add more and more and more clues and more stuff, reader's going to lose interest. Also, if you're breaking it up into that many small pieces over and over again, you've probably over-divided. You've cut your pizza into those really skinny, like barely thumb-wide slices, and that's not going to be satisfying for anybody. Think about the portion control you're demonstrating there. We're giving you a slice of pizza because that is a satisfying amount of pizza at a time. Cutting into smaller pieces, yes, means we get more pieces, but, you know, they're also like inhaled in 2 seconds, whereas at least with a slice of pizza, we had a chance to maybe chew it. Use this whole structure, use this idea when you are trying to make sure that the character demonstrates agency. So if you're out there writing something and you're not sure if your characters are being, you know, agenty, if they're not making direct decisions, this is a great way of making sure they're doing that by making sure the story has a question or a challenge they're trying to resolve. If you want to practice your agency demonstration, this structure is the best way to do it, short of like just writing an underdog sports story, because then you only have to make the characters do stuff. And we use this pretty aggressively in a lot of other genre as well. Political thriller, legal thriller, straight up mystery, locked door mystery, noir, hard-boiled crime, urban fantasy, hard sci-fi, military sci-fi, anywhere where there's a confrontation with an unknown villain who becomes known at time of climax, or thereabout, give or take. This is a really useful structure and a really useful tool. Take your conflict, take your unknown, figure out what it would take to lead to climax, break it into pieces, phase the story through finding each of those pieces and move it forward. Over and over and over again. If you're really looking for numbers, you need at least 2, beginning and ending. You know, starting clue that introduces the story, confirming clue that confirms, Bob did it. Minimum 2, maximum, probably for most American readers, your maximum is probably going to be somewhere like 8. And that's a lot. That's a lot of things. And I don't just mean like 8 footprints. I mean footprints plus glove plus shoe plus fingerprint plus angry hearsay plus murder weapon. That's overwhelming evidence. Most television really only seems to work between 3 and 5 clues, and that's more than enough. So let's steal a cue from television. 3 to 5, just fine. And that's how we're starting tonight. Technical and crunchy. So I guess we better move on to another crunchy question. Question 2. What's the difference between a plot reveal and a plot twist? Now, on its face, this question seems pretty obvious. And on one level, it can be obvious. A plot reveal is when something unknown suddenly, becomes known over the course of action and story. So we get a sense of, who was the big bad person all along? Oh my God, it was Aunt Gladys? That's a reveal. A plot reveal, works when we don't know a thing and then we do. It's called a forward production because it produces material forward. A plot twist takes information we already knew and changes how we feel about it. As in the inevitable betrayal of Aunt Gladys is a plot twist because secretly she was a robot from the future this entire time. It takes information we've already had and it changes how we feel about it. That is a reverse or backwards piece of production because we already knew this information and now we're recontextualizing it. That's the general difference. For the majority of how people are going to use it, that's how you want to use it. We use a reveal when we want to open the door. We want to set the story up and make it more available. we want to go from black and white Kansas to Oz in color, we reveal. We reveal because we open the door, and then all of a sudden we're there. We reveal that all of a sudden when Will Smith gets off the elevator, he's no longer in the Battery Tunnel. He's in fact at, Men in Black headquarters. We reveal that, it's not just a bunch of Nazis who have stolen the Ark of the Covenant. It's the worst Nazis ever. A twist is where we take something we already knew and screw with it. Oh my God, Indiana Jones' best friend who's only seeming to be in this movie is all of a sudden the bad guy all along? Yeah, okay, I guess that's a twist. I mean, it kind of twists things, but we can also see it coming a million miles away. That's the critical thing here. Savvy readers, savvy writers, savvy viewers and consumers of media will be able to spot the plot twist. That is not, by its face, automatically bad. It doesn't mean you suck at writing. It doesn't mean you've screwed up. Just because they've watched or listened to or read all of the above things like a billion times does not mean that you messed all the hell up because they saw it coming. You don't need to be extra clever in order to sort of like get one by them, let it slide past. There's no bonus trophy. You don't get a bigger advance. You don't get more sales just because they didn't see it coming. Some are going to see it coming. Some aren't going to see it coming. All you need to do is tell the best story possible. You do not have to go out of your way to make sure that nobody sees this twist. Oh my God. Those days of carefully super guarding your twists, kind of long gone. What is the best way to mask? Why is my thing cutting off? I gotta make my stuff bigger. Hang on. What's the best way to mask twists or reveals or clues? What a great question. So the best way to... Wow, that's a giant-ass window. We'll put it right there. The best way to mask them, well, it's going to be easier to mask a twist because the twist recontextualizes information. So you want to mask a twist by normalizing the thing before you twist it. Don't draw undue attention to it. If, the helpless damsel in distress who shows up at the detective's office in chapter 2 is secretly the bad guy that we are going to find out about in 300 pages, you don't want to keep talking about how strange and mysterious the girl is. You don't want to go overboard trying too hard, essentially, to draw the reader's attention away, because the minute you draw their attention at all, you're putting some kind of spotlight to it. So be very subtle, if even ignorant if possible, and casually check in. And really, this is usually why when we have a twist, there's always what's called an off twist, which is it's not character A, the real twist. We think it's character B. They're the likely suspect. It's the jilted, shocked secretary who hired the detective. Oh my God, I can't believe my boss is dead. Might be the real villain, but the likely suspect is the jilted, angry ex-wife. But when she turns up dead in the climax, it was the secretary all along. That's how you mask the twist, by making sure there's some place to direct or steer the reader's attention so that they're not thinking about, well, the only other character in this story is the woman, so it's gotta be her because reasons. You want to make sure the reader has some place to put their ideas. It's a red herring. Yes, that's where that comes from. It's the point of misdirection. It's the point of saying, hey, don't look in my left hand. Come over here and look at my right, which is just going to occupy you so that the trick happens in my left. You don't need a lot of them. Maybe one, maybe two. Two's kind of pushing it. One is generally enough per plot because you just want to distract or deflect. There's a difference, but it's semantic at this point. Away the reader's attention so that you can do something with it productively. The best way to mask a reveal is by keeping your story close and intimate until the moment where you open the door. So we keep the story in Kansas in the first act. We, make sure the first act sets up Indiana Jones going to South America and then going back to school and juggling everything. And then all of a sudden the army guys come and then we're just whisked away on the adventure magically. Oh my God, what are we doing? You play it tight. You stay intimate in your story. You move the camera in. You keep the story moving, but you're going to accelerate its pace once you hit that reveal. So you keep it slower so that you can speed up later. It's not necessarily as uniform as hiding a twist, where you can throw a red herring or you can feint or you can misdirect the story in some other way. Like our 2 cases are actually 1 case split in half in classic detective story. A plot reveal, it's more... Why is that so janky? I am so sorry. I'm learning this as we fly. There we go. That's what I needed to do. So the body getting up off the floor from Saw. Yes, that is a reveal and a twist. Because it's a reveal because, hey, we just thought it was a dead guy, and then we didn't call much attention to it. And it's a twist because it's the guy at the heart of the story. It's Mr. Saw. Well, really, it's just Jig Saw. His father was Mr. Saw. So, yes, that's how you call attention to it to such a degree that you make it not apparent. Yeah, there's a dead guy. There's a guy on the floor. And then maybe you talk about a character staring at the head or looking at the blood or freaking out. And then all of a sudden the body gets up off and it's this huge gut punch of like, ta-da! Terrible thing you didn't see coming is now happening. That's how you make it a big deal. Saw it might not be a great movie, but it is a great narrative teaching device. Though honestly, the first Saw movie is better than some of the later ones. Great question. Shall we move on to 3? Let's march on to 3. Question 3. That's not 3. Did I skip 3? Oh, man. Yeah, I totally forgot 3, you guys. All right. Well, I'm going to read 3 off my sheet. My bad. No, stop it, fingers. There we go. Why are word counts set up the way they are? Why? Why? Aren't they arbitrary? Why would a book get rejected for being over an arbitrary number? Okay, this came up on Twitter. Somebody, multiple people, in fact, later handed this off to me like, hey, John, say something about this. So, okay, I'm going to say something about this. Word counts are set up the way they are because there's a financial issue underneath it. And it goes like this. X number of words, generally, when formatted correctly, turns into Y number of pages. And Y number of pages generally leads to a certain size object, a book. And that book is going to have a certain Z weight. And that weight, when calculated out with printing costs and everything, is going to cost a certain amount to print and ship. So if I, a publisher, am trying to keep my costs down, I want to make sure that my book weight is within an acceptable amount so that the total number of books I can afford to ship and move and print. So how do I affect my print shipping weight? I have to affect the book size. How do I affect the book size? By either changing the productive size of the book, the margins, the paperback size, the hardcover size, which is a thing, but I've also got to think about the rest of the industry and the social contract I'm in that all books more or less look the same unless we try to do something different, but that's a different question. So I have a rough idea of how big a book should be and how big I want it to be based on the cover, based on sales, based on all this other data. So the thing I can control that will ultimately lead me, the cheap-ass publisher, to figure out how big a book is the word count. Because if the word count is of a certain size, then yes, it can be offset by paper thickness as well. Yes, I often skip paper thickness, but yes, your paper thickness, as well as its glossiness, because that affects the amount of ink that gets absorbed, can mitigate it. It can't totally nullify it, but you can certainly goof with it. And it is a factor in some, especially if you're doing like cookbooks or like photograph heavy image heavy text, more so than just regular plain old like, hey, it's my novel. But yeah, it can certainly be a factor. The idea, though, is that we set up a word count at a certain size because we're looking for a certain book and we know what to expect. So we tell you, hey, we're trying to keep it within this range. It is arbitrary, but it's arbitrary based on a financial decision. There's a lot of latitude because you could still write, 78,999 words. And yes, you will use more ink when you move to 80,001 words, technically, even especially if that word is really long. But the point is that you are setting up a more or less rough financial ballpark to expect. Okay, this book is going to cost more or less this much. Multiply that out by the number of books, and that's how much it's going to cost me, the cheap-ass publisher, to produce. And we turn that decision into a creative decision so that we can enforce the physical product decision down the line. That said, there's another element here, because we have to put finance on one side for a minute, because while that is down the road and that is a material thing and that's an important thing, the other part of this is publishing's big brass ring, for lack of a better word. The thing they love to talk about, the hill they're going to die on when it comes to word count, is the idea that they're setting up a business relationship with you and they want you to follow the rules. Except they make the rules, so they'll feel free to move the goalposts however they want, and you'll just have to deal with it. Here's an example. Remember when certain kinds of subgenres were way more open-ended than they are now? Or when we just decided to make new adult? New adult used to just be adult, but skewed a certain way. Or it used to be young adult, skewed a certain way. And then we decided to break it off. One, for financial reasons, and two, because a lot of people were writing in this space and we wanted to recognize it in some way so that we could profit off of it. Because capitalism. So publishing likes to live and die on this idea that you have to be able to follow instructions, because they're doing you a favor by printing your book, because that way they get to be in charge of the power dynamic. So they're doing you this favor, so they want to see if you can follow the rules, so that's why they enforce word count. The other factor here, on more of a straight editorial line, not really tethered to one particular publisher or another, the idea that as a writer, you can't constrain or hold yourself back or discipline yourself enough to aim for a certain word count and structure a story a certain way, is an impression a lot of authors don't want to get in the habit of making. Authorially, creatively, you want to be able to deliver a certain kind of expectation to your reader. They're not always and only coming to the books collectively just because you wrote them. That will come later. That'll come 2 or 3 books, 5 books, 10 books, a lifetime career later. But when you are just starting off and we are trying to establish that relationship with readers, it is really very beneficial, really very helpful to give them and deliver to those readers an experience they can reliably count on. I know that when I read a John book or a Ross book, it's going to be, 300 pages. It's going to be, 89,000 to 95,000 words. There's a little bit of wiggle room, but they know what to expect. And when the book suddenly gets bigger, oh my God, book 11 in the series is suddenly 190,000 words. It must be a big deal in the story. But if we are constantly yo-yoing around because you, the author, haven't quite learned to create your own boundaries for your own benefit, then the reader is less likely to overall connect with you, especially if you're debuting, especially if you're new, because it's going to seem like you just slopped together everything. Because who gives a shit about word count? Fuck word count. It's just, who cares? Fuck it. I'm just going to write everything and they can just deal with it. They're twits. I think that was the word the tweet used in particular. You're a twit if you don't get it. And in part, that's true. If you're going to, the reason you're rejecting is solely because you are 1,000 words over a made-up number, there's some legit feeling there. I get that. But you're also opening the door for the precedent that you weren't just 1,000 over, you were 100,000 over. Do you expect a reader to hang out with that? Some people do. There's a lot of ego tied up in that. But you've also got to think about the rest of the writing process. You want an editor to go through that? Their gut feeling is going to be to pare it back rather than tell you to embellish. It's an unspoken thing in editor school. Like that's just how we're trained. Don't completely discount the traditional publishing setup just because they're capitalists, racist, sexist, ableist monsters who want to limit things for the sake of pure profit. I know it's a problem. It's a huge problem. But the structure is there so that we can at least sort of all agree that we're trying to produce stuff. There's a lot of latitude. There's a lot more latitude. And if we're looking at only digital production, let's say you're just going to churn and burn a whole career of just, I'm making PDFs and chucking them up on Amazon and they're just downloadable for 99 cents and I'm going to do it 1,000 times. You're welcome to do whatever size you want. But remember, your goal isn't so much the word count, it's connecting with the readership. And if you're going to say on some level that you need those extra 20,000 words to build that connection, you're not demonstrating strength and craft that way. I'm a really great, race car driver. I'm a fantastic race car driver. I will eventually win the race for you, but you need to give me like a 10-lap warm-up. No, that's not how this works. I can totally win a basketball game if you give me an extra quarter to play. Okay. That's not how basketball works, but more power to you. Part of this structure isn't just you need to be professional in order to appease the people. Part of it is also your ability to demonstrate that you don't need a whole lot of setup to accomplish your task of connecting with readers. That's why word counts are set up the way they are. We don't like to talk about that part. We want to make it a part where the new writer has to leap through hoops like a Wallenda or something in order to dazzle or impress the people in the magic golden ivory tower. But part of it also comes down to how many words is it going to take you to make somebody go, oh, I like this book, I want to read more. That should be your craft goal. That should be what you're trying to do to get better and do more. So do that. I apologize. I swear I typed that up as a slide. I know I did. Maybe it'll show up later because I misnumbered it. It'll happen. But that's question 3. Any other questions so far while I get a mouthful of tea? Any other questions in any of the chats? Twitch, Zoom, YouTube? All right. Good call on paper thickness, by the way. I don't talk enough about paper thickness. I should. Paper thickness can make a substantial difference in printing cost, like magnificently so, especially if you're going to ship it, especially if it's high. Like the glossier, thicker, the better. Oof. What a nightmare that is. Yeah, good stuff. Did I answer every question? Yes, it appears I did. Any tips on sticking to personal deadlines? Yeah, okay. Personal deadlines. Well, question number 1 to you is going to be, why did you set the deadline in the first place? Question 2, is this a situation where when you set the deadline, you were trying to motivate yourself either through fear, oh my God, I have to do it, oh my God, the deadline's so close, I better get off my ass and do it. Or if you were just competing with yourself, all right, last time it took me 30 days, I want to see if I can do it in 29. Or is this an unrealistic expectation you're enforcing on yourself? Yeah, last time I did it in 30, this time I'm going to do it in 2. Figure out why you're setting the deadline the way you are. That's going to be part 1, because that's also going to influence how you resolve it. If this is coming out of a place of fear or enforced external motivation, that's something you need to challenge in yourself, because you're going to get real tired of having to externally motivate yourself over and over, book after book, time after time, especially when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 books, and you're well established. You know what you're doing beyond that. It's just that all of a sudden, oh my God, I need this deadline because otherwise I'm not going to do it. At some point, you want to be able to make that toggle or start to make the toggle and switch to I'm doing it when I do it. And you'll either reach a point where you are doing it until you're done. It's done when it's done. Or you're able to set an effective deadline that is far enough in the distance so that you actually have an appropriate, not overly stressful amount of time to do a thing. Or it's a reasonable enough deadline that you're not going to leave it for the last minute. Sticking to the deadline, in part, is mental. And the other part is in dividing the work you have to do to make it reasonable. So if, for example, you have 90,000 words to edit and you want to edit it in 2 weeks, divide 90 by 14, figure out how many words per day you need to edit. Or, I want to write 50 pages by Christmas. How many words do I have to write per day? Or how many words do I have to write every Tuesday if I only write on Tuesdays? Break it into consistent and manageable pieces over and over so that you're habituating it rather than saying, okay, my deadline's in 4 days, so I need to stay up. I can sleep in and then I can spend 3 days just wired on caffeine, because that's not, one, it's not healthy, and two, it's not an effective strategy for dealing with deadlines. Let the deadline be something more than a guillotine. Let it be a thing where you are actively developing. Okay, here's what I did today. I'm moving towards my deadline. I'm still within range. Here's the thing I'm doing. Okay, I have 15 more instances of this to go. I have 2 more instances of this to go. Doing it for 3 hours was untenable. I'm going to try doing it for 2, and I'm adjusting as we go. You're going to stick to that deadline when it no longer packs the emotional panic that deadlines might previously have, which means you're going to take some of the teeth out of it. You're going to make it less scary, and it just becomes, well, I'm making progress every day. I'm pointing at my successes rather than my absence, rather than the, oh my God, I still have this left to do. And it's going to be way more productive that way, because you'll be counting the things you have done rather than looking at the, oh my God, I still have this left. Because one pile will substantially be bigger than the other eventually, assuming you are working consistently. And then it's just practice. Now, if I say all that and we go through all that and you're still like, I don't know, John, I always need deadlines to motivate myself, I just can't seem to do it otherwise, then I think the issue might be that maybe you need accountability more than you need deadlines. Or you need somebody coming along and, making sure you're consistently applying better practice, as opposed to, well, I always need a deadline because when I was growing up at this, there was a terrible, fateful afternoon where deadlines forever changed my life. Cue flashback. It's not bad to have deadlines, but if you find yourself consistently not sticking to them, you might want to question their utility. Well, I would appreciate you being honest. If I'm honest, it's motivated by fear. You're not going to be stuck in one book forever. I understand the fear. Your fear is valid. Let's address that first. Yes, it's totally okay that you will be afraid. Oh my God, if I just do it when if it's out when it's out, in theory, yes, I could be doing this forever. Yeah, also if I sat in one place long enough, my body will phase into the atoms of the chair and I will become the chair, I guess, in some quantum version of reality. But that's not really practical. That's not, it's possible, but it's not incredibly likely that you'll be stuck on one book forever, because the thing that issue is discrediting is the idea that you want to do it, that you're motivated to do it, that you're interested in doing it, that you give a shit about doing it. So then you're going to, when you just say, I'm going to be stuck in one book forever, you're forgetting the idea that you're in charge of getting it done. Not somebody else. Not the way the wind blows, not whether or not the magic evil nightmare fairy visits you every third Thursday or something. I should write that idea down. That sounds interesting. But you're in charge of this, and you have to give yourself credit for the production you can do. I think a lot of writers get really hung up on the fact that I could get stuck in this. It could go really badly. Yeah, It super could. There could be a mudslide. There could be a bear attack. There could be ninjas. People could vote. You know, I don't know. Dumb people could end up in charge some more. Like, loads of bad things could happen. We could send billionaires into space and they come back. Like, loads of terrible things could happen. But there is also an equal chance that good things could happen. You could write consistently every day or every other day, or stick to a routine consistently, building up your writing, adding to your word count so that it won't be forever stuck, locked down and gone forever. You might surprise yourself if you give yourself a chance. And I don't mean like sit down and doggedly, you know, Jones out my schedule and just knock it out. I mean, like, give yourself some credit. There's no guarantee that by default you're going to let it be stuck forever. I think by default, everybody generally wants to be less stressed, but still productive. Yeah, there's always that initial sense of like, I'm taking a vacation. Screw all you guys. I'm going home. I'm going to put my feet up. I'm not going to do anything. But eventually that wears out. And then you get back to work on your own terms. You have to be willing to give yourself the chance of success in well, more or less proportion to how quickly you're willing to give yourself a chance of failure. It's still a coin toss. It's still 50-50. You got to give yourself more credit. And instead of letting your deadline be, oh no, if I don't do this thing, I'm bad things happen. Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening, bad things. Yeah, but it could also be good things. You got to give yourself a chance. It's one thing if you don't trust yourself. That's just a practice. That's just a find small enough goals that you can feel good about accomplishing them until you feel better about it. But if it's just a matter of I always need a deadline because otherwise I'm going to fail. Nah. Look how many words you just wrote me. You can clearly write sentences and get your point across. So you got to give yourself a shot. You're good enough to succeed. You got to keep telling yourself that. And then your deadlines become more of a general guideline. Like, okay, I know it's going to take me roughly this long to do it. Cool. Then I don't have to focus on the other parts because I'm busy doing this one thing. But that's a different view on deadlines as opposed to, that's the edge of the cliff we're driving towards, which is what I want to get you away from perceiving a deadline as. It's not the gloom or doom. It's not the march to the scaffold. It's just a milestone, a check-in point. What a wonderful topic. Anybody else? All right. Then we are going to march on to question 4. I know you struggle with the good enough stuff, but I'm always around to tell you that you're good enough. That's kind of what we do here. You're good enough. And I'll tell you again later. And in like 2 or 3 questions, when this comes back up again, it's going to come back up again. All right. Here we go to question 4. Let's see if I got this set up right. 4. Here we go. What are some things I can do to increase how much a reader dislikes a character? Okay. This half of the dislikes, likes divide is generally easier for people because we're generally talking about we want the antagonist disliked. We want our bad guy to be disliked by the reader. So we do that by demonstrating the bad guy's badness. To do that, we're going to create context. Context is going to come up later in other questions. But the express point here is that we want to set up situations. Yes, yes, I will tell you right now, there is a your mom joke coming, but it's not for another, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. It's 5 questions. There's a your mom joke coming in 5 questions. I feel like I should make like a counter on the screen or something. Okay. back to disliking a character who, unlike your mom, we'll talk about your mom in a minute. Everybody else does. Onward. To dislike a character, we have to create a context where the decisions the reader makes about that character generates disliking them as a conclusion. We see the character do something, and we are either told through narration or a character's opinion, or we are left to draw our own conclusion that it's bad, whatever the character just did. So if we want to make the condo developer who's looking to bulldoze the malt shop the bad guy, then we want to demonstrate that the malt shop is a place that should not be bulldozed, and that everybody likes the malt shop, and the malt shop is the greatest. It's the coolest place, you guys. So therefore, anybody who's opposed to the positive context and the good stuff that happens there must be a bad guy. Even though the number of things the character, the real estate developer, has done is limited to having one moment of dialogue where they're like, I'm going to bulldoze the malt shop, whereas everybody else has done 2, 3, 5, 10, 45, 65, 100,000 things. Quantitatively, we still need the context to figure out that, oh, what this character has done or has said leads us to dislike them because of the other stuff going on with other people. It's contextual. If I'm walking an old lady across the street without context, that can seem positive. But the minute I add the context of I'm walking her across the street so that I can, throw her off a cliff because there's a personal deadline or something involved, then all of a sudden you can dislike me as a character. Context is everything. And the definition a reader draws from that context is critical. When a writer really screws around with this, when they're really trying too hard to make a hero, make a villain sympathetic, or have a redemption arc, or try really hard to make a bad guy a good guy, they start screwing with that context, and they start working in very broad shades of gray as opposed to the binary black and the binary white. They're either good or they're bad. No, there's all these gradations in the middle. They're a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And what that's doing is complicating the context and not making it clear. Now, if that's your intention because you want to, make sure the reader doesn't draw clear distinctions anywhere in the book, then great. That's what you're doing. You're succeeding. Good job. But you can't have it both ways, where there are very clear blacks and very clear whites. There are very clear goods and very clear bads, but also this one character who's kind of in between, because the reader is looking to have consistent emotional investment, and the reader is going to look for context in order to make that possible. So we can increase how a character is disliked by contrasting what they're doing versus everybody else, and contrasting the conclusions characters draw for their own things versus their dislikable characters' things. If everybody at the mall shop's just having a great old time, oh my God, you guys, aren't we just the most diverse group of friends ever? And then our bad guy comes along and it's like, I'm going to bulldoze this place so that you can't have fun. Well, we bounce those two things off each other, and we conclude that while it might be capitalistically interesting to bulldoze this and put up condos because condos are a thing, we side with the characters we have a better connection with, which is generally going to be our protagonists, which is generally going to be the people who are enjoying the malt shop. We can increase that dislike, not necessarily by making the bad guy do more stuff. That's how we get into mustache twirl. I'm going to bulldoze the malt shop and tie people to train tracks, and I'm going to use the bathroom without washing my hands, and I'm going to make sure I really only listen to Nickelback. Here, take that, supervillains. You don't need to stack up 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 25, however many things to just be bad thing plus bad thing plus bad thing plus bad thing in order to get across, hey, this is the bad guy. You just need to set up a few of those things against the context of everything else that's positive. And that's how you increase dislike for a character. You don't need somebody to kick a puppy, steal candy from babies, harm an old lady, threaten the malt shop, light a cigarette with somebody's rent check. You don't need to keep doubling down. Only if you think your reader is either incredibly new to reading, or you think they are just stupid and they're not going to get it unless you make the displays of evilness or the displays of badness so grandiose, and you think so little of their ability to figure things out, that you have to make it that big. Otherwise, you're just developing opposition. Well, contrasting opposition. Character A feels one way, character B feels another. Which one do I, the reader, side with? Great. Therefore, the other side must be the people I dislike. It's a very simple way to play with the us versus them dynamic. Really useful in protagonist v. antagonist stories. But let's go look at the other side of this. Let's go look at question 5. What are some things I can do to increase how much a character likes, how much a reader likes a character? Well, we're still going to use context. That's good, but now instead of trying to create a difference in context, now we're going to try to create similarity in context. So whereas the bad guy's looking to bulldoze the malt shop because he doesn't like fun and nobody should be dancing in Footloose Town, we are going to try and demonstrate a number of people and a number of situations and an amount of context all on one side of the emotional divide. Oh my God, Kevin Bacon is coming, and every time Kevin Bacon comes around, we all dance. Dancing is great, and we learn about each other, and we grow as people. Oh my God, Kevin Bacon is saving the day. All of a sudden, we like Kevin Bacon more. Creating that context means you have to understand the side that the character is on. Because, yeah, you can make an argument that you can also like an antagonist. If you want to look at racist piece of shit Mel Gibson's movie Payback, which is a really common crime trope, it's an okay movie, but Mel Gibson is not an okay person. The idea being fundamentally that whatever character you want the reader to side with, you have to create a relationship where the reader or viewer likes that character. To do that, you're going to create a context for that character where the reader can not only agree with the actions the character is taking, that's one way to solve the problem, but it's not the only way. But you also want to create a scenario where it is suggested that these are the good things to do. You see people laughing. You see people cheering. The music cues kick in if we're watching TV. You get positive benefits in the story when a character moves or acts in a certain way. The story rewards us with more story and positive successes. And that helps us figure out that, oh, these things were the right things to do. And that's how we increase liking a character. If you're thinking about this, and if you're about to ask, but John, what about the cosmetic stuff? How much stubble do I need to give my rugged antihero? How much of a troubled backstory should the bad boy romance option have? All of those things are nice, but you don't want to pin the entire liking or disliking of a character on, how many abs they do or don't have, or how sparkly as a vampire they were, or how hunky they were as a mechanic with a terrible secret. You want to do more than that. You want to do better than that. That's what we're aiming for. You want to increase liking a character by showing that the actions they take and the context those actions and those goals create are positive, and you agree with them as a reader or viewer, and then your liking for the character increases. That's how. Let's do one more. There we go. I am not a native English speaker. Is it smarter to write my book in my native language? For the record, I don't know what their native language was. They didn't mention it. Is it smarter to write my book in the native language and then get it translated when I sell the overseas rights? Or should I just write it in English to begin with? I love business questions like this. And I love business questions like this because there isn't a definitive answer. Here's why. Because I don't know if you're going to be able to sell your overseas rights that way. I don't know if your book will sell that well or print that well. I don't know. That doesn't mean automatically that it won't. Don't freak out. That's not what I'm saying. But waiting for the English translation is an option. It is. You can't go wrong here. You can argue that if English is not your native language, writing it in English off the bat will be more difficult for your production because, it's not your native language. But there are editors for that. There's writing coaches for that. There's, critique groups and beta readers, and you can get help writing in English. But that might be productively frustrating. You might have a harder time doing that. And if you want to wait for translation as a result or as a consequence, that's fine. But one is not automatically better than the other. And this sort of falls into that whole category of questions. We've been sort of dealing with them maybe once a week for the last couple of weeks, where there's no one clear answer. It's really coming down to, well, what do you want to do? You're the author. If you want to wait until you sell well enough to have overseas rights that can be distributed, so that can lead to different publications of your book, great. Feel free. Go ahead. If you want to write it in English because you want to improve your English and just you think it'll be easier in the long run, great. Write it in English. And it doesn't even need to be, we don't need to talk about English. You can insert other language there as well. It's really up to you. It's absolutely up to you. For me, I am a native English speaker, so for me, it is easier to write in English to begin with. The implication here being that if I'm writing it in English, I can send it directly to an English-speaking audience. Yeah, that's fine. You can do that. That's okay. Up to you. For me, now, granted, I do not know the person who wrote this question, and I've never spoken to them beyond this question, so I can't say for certain how much work would their English need, or how much translation work would their book need. I can't answer that. I don't know. But I think for me, I would write the book in whatever way makes the writing most accessible for me. I got to sit down and write it. So I'm going to write it in whatever language or languages I need to in order to produce the best story possible. And then either I can get it translated before I move forward, or I can get it translated as part of my rights sale. But when it comes down to just plain old making the story happen, my advice and my personal John habit is to produce the book in whatever language and whatever structure I need to get the best version of it out of my head and onto the page. That, while not my greatest answer, it feels a little cop-out-ish to me. I think that's the best answer I've got right now. I think you should write it in whatever way is easiest and then cross the bridge later. Figure out if you want to translate it after the fact. I don't think you should unduly burden yourself in an extra language that you're maybe not comfortable with. If you're comfortable with it, go for it. Go ahead. But if you're not comfortable with it, I don't think you need to take that on as well in addition to telling the story. Good question. All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Zoom? YouTube? Twitch? Anybody? Else we will march on to our first ever question about school and homework. All right. Let's go talk school and homework. In a PCP, if you don't know what a PCP essay is, it's point-counterpoint essay. In a point-counterpoint essay, that's where we have pluses and minuses for our sides in the argument. In our PCP essay, how do I effectively use transitions? Okay, first of all, thanks for your question about schoolwork. Second, I'm really sorry school is still happening. Third, fight the man. Fourth, let's answer your question. Generally, between points, you're going to use section headings to indicate a change in topic. I'm going to answer one point in its own section with a section heading, and then when I'm ready to go to the next point, I'm going to make up a new heading and then move through. Some teachers, some professors are okay with that. Let your headings be your segues. Let your headings be your transitions. Sure. However, there are some humans, I'm using air quotes, who want your essays and your paperwork and your theses and all your stuff to be more than just stapled together by your heading, your H2s or your headers and your subtitles. What you want to do there is create a segue, a short paragraph, 1 to 3 sentences at max, that help transition from one point to the next. To do that most effectively, you want to figure out some way of building a bridge between the point you just made and the point you're about to make. What relationship do those two things have other than the fact that they're just two things you're talking about? Okay, I'm going to go talk about how debt is terrible. Home internet cut out. Was curious if you heard copyright stuff with Warhammer. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the Warhammer. Yeah, totally. Okay, we'll get to the Warhammer. I promise. We will get to Warhammer. But first, I want to go back and answer this essay question. So, you want to make sure you've got a way to connect in one or more, ideally two, sentences from one point to the next by finding a relationship between those two things. That's going to come down to your planning, choosing which point to make before which other point, or which point comes after whatever point. And two, it's going to come from how you're migrating your ideas, how you're moving the reader through the text. Do you want to make a joke? Do you want to use a pun? Do you want to make a metaphor? Do you want to use a simile? Do you want to, make point A very different from point B, so you're going to sort of show the opposite? So if point A is talking about how debt is dumb, point B might naturally be, well, money as an extension of debt is also dumb. I don't like it. Let's get rid of it. Your segue might be, the problem with the heart of debt is that money is a fabricated point. There's your segue, because I've brought the first point and I've tied it to the second point directly in one sentence. That's how you use a transition effectively. Take your one point, build a bridge to your second point, and then get right to your second point. You don't have to linger around. You just need to tie it off, put a bow on your shoes, and move forward. Now, there was a question about copyright. Okay, disclaimer. I am not a lawyer. I am not giving you legal advice. I am just a dude on the internet with a microphone who has production and editorial experience, but I myself am not a lawyer. Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. But I myself am not a lawyer. And while I have, done things with lawyers, and while I have, I once touched a lawyer's butt, I am not giving perfectly legal advice other than like, hey, try not to, engage in violence with the state directly, because the state will exercise undue pressure. The revolution is coming, yes, brothers and sisters, but at the same time, you don't want to... The state has more resources than you do, so be prepared for an unfair fight. There's the extent of the John Adamus legal advice. That said, there are a number of companies and people in the world who thrive on the fact that they can be incredibly litigious for the sake of bullying and for the sake of mayhem causing. One of the more notorious ones here are the people at Games Workshop, who, for the number of years, the decade or so I was involved in tabletop role-playing production, everybody knew Games Workshop were people who were very quick to, the joke always was, if you looked at them funny, they would sue you. Because they would do things like try and make copyright claims or, ownership claims on things that maybe they didn't entirely have a claim on, but since no one else spoke up about it, they just assumed they were the big cheese, and it led into the most common being space marines. First with space, then marines, then space marines as a concept, and it really led into a lot of like hinky groundwork about things. The best advice I can give you is this, : ready? Here we go. Make a break. Don't live in fear of copyright, and do not let it stop you from creating your thing. Yes, Games Workshop did steal their stuff from other people. Isn't it shocking how they stole their stuff from other people and then all of a sudden claimed that it was theirs? You would think they were white colonial people with how quickly they were stealing the shit from other humans. It was like Elvis in music. They were just taking other people's shit. I will probably get hate mail for that comment, by the way, just so you know, but it's fine. It makes me giggle. The important thing here is that so many writers get all jammed up about copyright. Oh my God, someone's coming to steal my stuff. Oh my God, this is a thing. What are we going to do? Yep. Go ahead. Live in fear. Get nothing done. Hold yourself back. Go ahead. Could a lawsuit be bad? Totally. Will it suck? Totally. Could it be expensive? Could be. It could also be unfounded. And you have resources in different dimensions than the lawsuit itself, because social opinion can be a thing, as can nuisance lawsuits, countersuits. There's loads of different tools at your disposal here. Just because, Magic Big Bully Company shows up and swings their Magic Big Bully Company, litigation genitals around, does not mean that you need to cow from them or genuflect as they speak, because you get to make your thing. And there's a lot of issues authors have about copywriting ideas and protecting this and that, and you just can't do that to begin with. You just can't. You're curious about what you, the creator, might let other people get away with? Well, that's up to you to decide. What are you willing to get away with? There's different things like the Creative Commons license that allows you to sort of control access to your material. Or you could take a more black flag approach and just say, well, intellectual property is inherently theft, so here's my stuff. I'll share it with you, comrades. There are loads of different options made available to you, but you get to make that decision as to how you want to distribute your work at all, what you want to say, what you want to do. But living in fear of copyright, living in fear of, oh my God, this idea I had today of, a small squishy dough person who giggles and, wreaks havoc, that's way too close to the Pillsbury Man. Oh no. Yeah, I guess. It's also really close to the Gingerbread Man and several German and Viennese stories of nightmare goblins, as well as, I think, a few indigenous people myths about food coming back to life. It's been a while since I've read that material, but yeah, it's okay. Similarity between work does not inherently mean theft. Likewise, you can't insulate yourself from those ideas. Ideas are ideas. They're just electrical discharges in your brain chemistry. They are not to be placed upon a pedestal. They're just ideas. You can develop an idea. Do you know the number of people who in the last year have written stories about there's a terrible tragic illness decimating mankind and only one plucky protagonist and maybe their love interest can do something about it? Do you know how many stories like that there are right now? Bajillions. And before that, it was, do you know how many vigilante superheroes there are? Before that, it was how many teenage vampires there are? How common are lawsuits like this? Not very. I don't have numbers to give you, but they're not. That's not a like everybody's afraid that they're going to be the one. And there are some, and I can tell you that there are some YouTube channels that specifically cover this kind of thing. But it's not like they happen to everybody every day. It's sort of like, how often are people hit by buses? Well, I mean, it happens, and it sucks when it happens, but we don't all go outside and get hit by a bus. They're, a thing that happens. And sometimes, yes, there are people who sort of troll, or trawl, I should say. They trawl along and find very small readerships to expressly bully them because they're insecure about their own craft or ability or knowledge or wisdom or compassion. So it's easier to bully somebody who's just small and can't put up a fight. But it also, being that small and having that small readership affords some level of anonymity. It's almost not worth it to fight you because you're small. But it is not a very common thing. But the internet, social media, the hashtag writing community is going to tell you that, oh my God, behind every bush, in every corner, underneath every bed, behind every shadow, there is somebody who's going to steal your work. And that's just not the goddamn case. It's just not the case. That's just not going to happen. Why is that not going to happen? Because everybody's afraid that everybody else is going to do it. And if we're all afraid that everybody else is going to steal it, who's going to be available to go steal things? If we're all afraid of our houses being broken into so none of us leave our homes, who's going to burgle? It is way more writer v. writer. Way more writer v. writer than publisher v. writer. Because publishing can just go, yeah, we'll find the next one. I'll give you an example. Just a hypothetical example. Let's suppose there is a transphobe who writes a set of stories about a prophesied child who has to go fight big giant evil. And to do that, they attend a special school and receive a special education because, they're special. And that book series goes out and becomes just incredibly successful. And then all of a sudden, loads of publishers are like, hey, do you have another prophesied young adult teenage story that we can turn into multiple books? And then they churned out a ton of them. Or perhaps you were the secretary of a landlord and you decide you're going to write a series of books because you have an English literature degree from a school and you decide you want to write an English romance with a vampire and a werewolf. And then you sit down and write it, except it's not very good and it somehow turns into a $1 billion empire. And then all of a sudden everybody else is like, hey, that's successful. I'm going to make one with angels. I'm going to make one with demons. I'm going to make one with Greek gods. I'm going to make one with the Roman gods. I'm going to make one with the Picts and the pagans. The publishers will always move on to the next thing. They have to. That's how they survive. But writers get into pissing contests all the time. Related to this, what's the best course of action when you find your work on pirate sites? Well, okay. I have debated this question before, and my answer then was not very popular. Sadly, my answer really hasn't changed. If you are willing to go through the process of pointing out to the site that, hey, that's my stuff, I'd like it back, you are completely and totally free to do whatever you need to do. Usually it's an email to somebody to point out that, hey, that's mine, I'm putting a claim on it, and hope that they will comply with it. But there is also a chance that you can say, hey, that's my stuff. And the response will be, that's your stuff. That's right. And then move on with your day. So your best course of action is to do what you can to bring attention to it. And yeah, there's some trust involved. There's some sense of like, well, I'm telling you it's my thing. Please take it down. You have to hope that they do. Me personally, piracy is a part of the process. It's an unpleasant part. It robs small creators of critical income, and capitalism does not allow for anything like that. And capitalism claims piracy is bad because it's not a direct profit market, even though piracy on one level is one of the ways that disabled and marginalized communities get work made accessible and available to them. But we don't talk about that part because it's piracy and they're taking money out of my pocket. Yeah, but you're also making it available for groups of people who wouldn't otherwise have a chance to see your work. So you gotta, step one, rationalize your own view on piracy. But think of the free exposure. Yeah, I've dealt with exposure. That's how you get hypothermia. That's how you die in the heat. That's how you lose in the Oregon Trail. I don't want to think of the free exposure. There are things I want to think about exposed, and none of them belong in this chat because Twitch has a terms of service. The important point I'm trying to make before I go talk more about butts, because I was talking about butts, you guys, is that it's just part of the stuff. It sucks. And for small writers, it can feel like, oh my God, my stuff's going out for free way more than it's going out for sale. Maybe it is. But maybe you can also change your opinion on how you handle it. Hey, thanks for creating a torrent of my work. I've got some new stuff coming. I will give you a torrent 30 days after it releases. How's that sound? That way you don't have to pirate it. Maybe it could be included with the pirate torrent. Maybe we can include a text file of, hey, if you like this stuff, check out my other work. Could we do that? Maybe you want to have a marketing campaign of pirated in 4 languages now. Maybe you do. Who knows? Not always bad. That was the part that got me into a lot of hot water. It's not always bad. It sucks because capitalism trains us to think it sucks. But it's just people sharing information. And if you didn't know it was on the site, they'd still be doing it. Is your life any different? The day before you found it was on that site, it was on that site. And it was trafficked I don't know how many times. What changed? That was the argument I made two years ago. Oh man, I got many angry messages for that. But the best thing you can do, if you're going to do something like that, is tell the people doing it, hey, that's my stuff. I'd like you to take it down. Some will. I can't say everybody will. Some will, some won't. And you got to pick and choose if that's a hill you want to die on. On to, it's a great question. It's also a dicey question. I'm happy to answer it, by the way. I love that question. I love talking in that space. It's fantastic, but there's not always an easy answer. All right. Question 8. I want to write a moderns in quotation marks, Western, as opposed to a modern Western with both words in quotation marks. What do I need to know? All right, first of all, I'm going to define these terms. A modern Western, where both words would be in quotes, would be a Western that is happening in the present day. Cattle ranchers, meat distributorships, farmers, ranch hands, the cowboy in the present era. Although I should point out that cowboy isn't a slur, so let's maybe use a different word. How about we go with, let's just go with Westerns and gunslingers. Can we do that? Can we agree that that's not necessarily the clearest, but it helps convey part of the image? Because I'd rather not keep using the slur. So let's make a concerted effort to not use the slur. So in a modern Western, both words in quotes, we are basically telling a modern, we're using the modern time frame to tell the typical Western story, which is generally going to be big capitalist versus big farmer, or gunslinger looking to reclaim glory, or some kind of down-home, yeehaw, Russell vibe, or some other kind of tense story that is expressed in a spirit of freedom and opportunity, because those are the typical tropes of Westerns. something like that made to feel Western. You don't necessarily need the spurs and the 6-shooter and the hat. It can help. However, when we put modern in quotes, we're no longer talking about a Western set in the modern day. We are looking at a Western that has been adapted. So we're going to take the format of a Western, which is probably going to be more thematic. The lone hero overcoming odds, the one last ride for a great warrior, the fish out of water coming and making a new name for himself, the revenge story. All of those are very common thematic Western tropes. And applying it in sort of collective modern ways. So you would take this theme, whatever theme you pick, and you would find a modern angle on it. So whereas in a classic Western, you would have the gunslinger who, swears off, picking up a gun ever again, and then one day having no choice but to ride out one more time with his gun and defeat the evil that 20 years ago drove him to pacifism. That's a classic Western. To modernize it, you take that same idea, guy who swears off something suddenly has to come back and deal with it. You find a different application for that idea, not necessarily limited to or not necessarily included with gunslingers or riding off or anything like that. It could be, the lawyer who's avoided the courtroom now suddenly gets thrown back in. Or it's a fish out of water story that isn't played for levity. The thing you need to know, the critical thing you need to know here, is that if you're only putting modern in quotes and you're telling a modern story, you need to keep the story moving, and you do not need to complicate it with undue plots and stuff. The story's pacing should be tight, and the scope of story should be intimate. That doesn't mean brief. That doesn't mean hyper short. It just means take your time and develop it. Build a strong A plot with one B plot underneath, and that's it. That's the effective way to do it so that you're not juggling multiple B plots, multiple points of view, all that stuff. That's how you would build a modern Western. Let's split one more semantic lit hair. Question 9. I want to write a science fiction fantasy Othello. If I were a client of yours, where would you tell me to start? Okay. Step 1, I would have you read Othello. And I would have you read Othello and take it apart. And when I say take it apart, here's how I would tell you to take it apart. Not just break it down by who says what words, but I would have you look at the character arcs for every character in this story. Here's Othello, here's Iago, here's Desdemona, here's random guy number 2. The nice thing about Shakespeare is that damn near every character has an arc. Even if that arc is just they start the scene saying something and they finish the scene having said something and then they go away, fine. That's their arc. Map out all the arcs. And then, with that complete, figure out where those character arcs build or latch together or connect together for the sake of building an A-plot. How do we make an A-plot out of these character arcs? Again, because it's Shakespeare, characters sit at the heart of things. So, the A-plot of Othello is Iago's a jerk. So, how do we shape that based on character arcs? We look at the trajectory for Iago, the trajectory for Desdemona, the trajectory for Othello, and we go from there. That's how we make that work. After that, I would tell you to go look at what science fiction and fantasy elements you want to bring in. Are we setting this on a spaceship? Are we putting this on an alien planet? Are we using a lot of hard science fiction technology? Are we telling a soft science fiction story? Is everybody a robot? Are only half the people robots? Is this brain in a jar kind of stuff? Where does the sci-fi or the fantasy or the whatever come in beyond the character arcs? Because if the science fiction part is only there in a superficial way, well, it's Iago and Desdemona and Othello, but they're just crew members on a spaceship traveling from SETI Alpha 6 to SETI Alpha 2. Okay, then it's not a very science fiction fantasy Othello. It's Othello taking place in a different location. How much Othello are you leaning into, and how much science fiction fantasy are you leaning into? And then, depending on that those derivations, how much of that stuff influences the other. It'll be less about daggers and swords and probably more about ray guns, laser pistols, quantum, temporal energy, photonic displacers. Somebody's going to reverse some polarity. And then, like your mom, it's all going to end up a mess the next morning. That was your mom joke, by the way. But I would tell you to start by breaking down the characters. I would tell you to start by taking apart everybody's arcs. Because if you're going to tell a science fiction Othello or a science fiction Moby Dick or a science fiction Die Hard or a science fiction whatever, you better understand that piece of source material inside and out and sideways. Absolutely. So that you can not only replicate it beat for beat when you need to, but you can also iterate on it, improvise on it, parallel it and mirror it and reference it in ways that aren't just, and now we're just going to, they took an intermission break here, so I'm going to put in a picture. You don't want to just photocopy it. You want to do something with it. But you can't do that until you take apart all the other story structure. What a delightful question. We're going to pause for a second so I can drink more tea. Does anybody have any questions? Is there a Shakespeare rewrite I thought was good? Yeah, there have been a couple. I liked Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. Not just because I'm a human being of that age. Ooh, a motivated question. I love motivated questions. We'll get there, but I want to finish this Shakespeare one first. And I liked 10 Things I Hate About You, because again, I am a person of that age, and Heath Ledger was amazing. I enjoyed, though, the David Tennant Royal Shakespeare Company version of Hamlet. Now, I have a soft spot for Hamlet. I've always liked Hamlet. I have liked Hamlet since I read it for the first time in middle school. It has stuck with me. I both think it's good and I enjoyed it. I thought, and I've looked at on Patreon, I've looked at, Much Ado About Nothing, and it was okay. It didn't move me the way it moves other theater people. Oh my God, it's transcendent. Cool, whatever. I have watched I think is it Robin Williams? I think it's Robin Williams in Hamlet at some point. It's a Kenneth Branagh version of Hamlet. It was also okay. Like, I thought it was good. I did not enjoy it. It was like 9 million hours long. I wanted to pull out my eyelashes. But I enjoy those things because it moves something in me. Depending on what that is, depending on the day. But if you were to look at Shakespeare and go, okay, I want to get into Shakespeare, where do I start? You want to start with Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. That is legit, honestly, where I would tell just about anybody to start when it comes to Shakespeare. Because it's the language, but it's also the language done accessibly. And then after that, I would tell you to go look at something crunchier and slower, because ultimately things slow down. and it becomes a play, and you got to handle it differently in fiction because it's a play. But don't dive into the deep end of the pool. Start with something colorful and bright and campy. All right, let's do the motivated question. I love the motivated question. How do you stay motivated? You're very welcome. It was a great question. How do you stay motivated? Got some options here. Option number 1, how important is your goal to you? If your goal is very important to you, in theory, you will make time to make progress towards your goal. If there's some kind of difficulty that is preventing you from making that progress, then you need to do something about mitigating that difficulty. You need to get some help because your goal is important to you. And when I say important to you, I mean directly to you. I don't mean I think that everybody else is telling me this is supposed to be important, so I've adopted it for myself. I mean you, for yourself, have decided, that this is important to me. And sometimes that's enough to drive you forward. This is important to me, so I'm going to work on it and get better at it. It is important to me that I write regularly so that I can maintain the development I'm making with my voice, that I can get better at writing sentences. So it's important to me, so I'm making time to do it. I do it. For me, right now, one of the things that's important to me is that I learn how to shuffle cards. It's a therapy habit I've been told to develop because it gives my hand something to do, but it's also good for like finger dexterity and stuff. And sleight of hand card magic has always fascinated me. So I've made it important. I bought a deck of cards. I'm holding it now, in fact. And I bought a couple books on just the basics. And I just spend 15 minutes a day over the course of the day just shuffling cards. It gives my hand something to do, and it makes me feel like I'm practicing. And I am better now than I was 2 weeks ago. The important thing there is that I have made time for myself to develop the thing I want to develop. And my enjoyment of doing this, if I want to get better at cooking, I have to cook more. If I want to, get better at this thing, and it's important to me to be better at it, whatever the thing is, I make time for it, and that motivates me. But that can't motivate everybody. That doesn't motivate everybody. Sometimes you have to be motivated because you want an end result. I want to be published. I want to be able to print out the first sales receipt. Oh my God, I sold a book, and rub it in the face of everybody who said I could never do it. Okay. Being goal motivated, not a bad idea sometimes. Sometimes that spite tastes pretty damn good. So what do we do about it? Well, the only way we're going to get a chance to sit down and have that thing in the piece of paper where we can go, ha, you suckers, I've fucking done it, is for you to write the book. So that's another way to accomplish your task. But there are still times when that's not enough, when you know what you need to do, but you just can't seem to drum up the energy, when you just can't seem to figure out oh God, this sucks for whatever reason. Those are the moments you need to stop and take a deep breath. And figure out what the problem is. And I don't mean fall down some kind of deep therapy hole. And I don't mean spend undue weeks studying some kind of new philosophy that will unlock your mind. I mean, figure out what's jamming you up. Are you afraid? Are you worried you're not going to do it right? Are you afraid you're going to fail? Are you just tired? Do you want to drink some water? Do you want to take a nap? Should you try and get laid? Do you want to have a Coke? Do you want to stretch? You probably need some water. Or maybe you want to walk around a little bit first. Or maybe you need to spend some time and laugh. Maybe there's some other need in the way. So that's how you handle it. That's what you do. You figure out what in the immediate is sapping that motivation and go from there. Now, if you're asking me personally how I stay motivated, because the alternative is, you're very welcome. The alternative for me is absolute despair. If I'm not motivated, none of this happens. If I'm not motivated, then I will literally, bad things will happen. Just flat out bad things will happen. And I don't want them to happen. No, that's not an option for me. When my motivation flags, and there are days it flags, today was not so much a day it flagged. Yesterday was a day it flagged. Those are the days when I have to look at both the things that I feel I have no other choice in doing. Oh my God, I have to do this because other things are depending on it. Or I look at the stuff that I want to do. Oh my God, yeah, there's a million things that are hanging, waiting, that need me to accomplish this thing. But I just can't. I'm done today. And then I have to make the very difficult, guilt-inducing decision of like, well, yeah, the best way I'm going to be able to solve these problems, since I can't solve them right now, is to do the things I can solve, manage the parts I can solve, and just be okay with the fact that I couldn't get everything done, and be okay with the fact that I can't make everything perfect in one day, and be okay with the fact that this is not going to be a thing like, oh, it hurts when I do this, so I've stopped doing that. It hurts when I bend my arm, so I've stopped bending my arm until it heals. Or, when the button turns green, I press it. Well, then don't press it. That's really important. That's really hard sometimes. But it happens. And we don't want to live in a bubble like a tech bro, where we're all positive all the time because all we're trying to do is crush it, bro. We're just here to crush it. Because that's unhealthy. You have to recognize that failure exists, that frustration exists, that it's hard, that there are a number of people with advantages and a number of people with disadvantages and vice versa. And you need to be able to move and dance accordingly with that. But when your own personal motivation is lacking, figure out why. And then figure out what you can do to disprove some of that poor motivation. Because if let's say you're not motivated, you're unmotivated, or you're disinterested because I just suck. I'm stupid. This is bad. I suck at writing. Okay, what can you do to disprove that? Because all right, let's take the question at its face value. Okay, you're stupid. Cool. How do we prove that? You want to prove that because you just haven't written? No, I've seen stupid people. They write or not write all the time. So what can we do to disprove it? Well, you got any evidence that you're not? Yeah, I got, I did this successfully. I played that game. I didn't die in the first 2 seconds. I, didn't burn my house down making toast. Yeah, okay. We've just disproved your entire notion. You're not stupid. So the better question is, what's in the way with the writing? Why aren't we creating the way you want to be creating? What's in the way? Well, I don't know how. Okay, let's go find you some help. All of a sudden now, instead of labeling yourself as stupid, we are getting you like a more targeted direction. Oh, yeah, you just want to know how to write a better arc? Okay, here, let's talk about arcs. Let's figure out how to put this together. Ask a question, get an answer. Easy peasy. It's a really common thing for a lot of people to put all their chips in motivation and say like, oh, I'm not motivated. If the one thing goes wrong and all of a sudden motivation goes away. I do that. I do that all the time. You should see me on Wednesday mornings. Oof, I'm a mess. Because motivation shouldn't be conditional, and too many times it is. And that's where you have to sit down and figure out like, well, what's in the way? I'm just lonely. I'm tired. I'm hungry. There are not enough butts in my life. How do I fix any of those things? Nachos, butts, have some water, go to the bathroom, take a shower, put on something that makes me laugh. You do whatever you can do to disprove the doubt in your head a little at a time, and it makes a difference. And your motivation comes and goes, and you'll learn how to ride it, and you'll learn how to build it, and you go from there. I love motivation questions. On we march to question 10. Should every writer have a Patreon? I also like questions that have very simple answers. No. No. Every writer should not have a Patreon. Humans generally should not have Patreons because, well, there should be universal basic income. We should be able to support ourselves because we created money, so we get to determine the rules for it. And when capitalism is, hurled into the sea, brothers and sisters, we will be able to institute a system that allows everybody to prosper. Because, they did it in Star Trek. We should be able to figure that shit out here. Patreon as a writer, though, once we get past the financial consideration, is not a requirement for growth. Yes, it does build a community, but there are other ways to build communities. You can get a Discord, you can get a Facebook group, you can get a newsletter, you can get a website. There are ways to develop regular distributions. Use Patreon. Every month on Patreon, I send this out to my readers. You could do that without Patreon. Just because other people have one doesn't mean you need to have one too. I don't think it's a requirement for every writer. I think it is a regrettable necessity for the majority of us who need some other way of keeping the lights on. I have a Patreon. It literally pays for all the things you are communicating to me on. It's how I stream. It's why I stream. It helps me feed the cats. It helps me buy medication so that I have motivation so that I can do these things like, exist. It's critical to me. By the way, shameless plug coming. If you want to go check out the Patreon, you can check out the Patreon at patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouCreate, because that's how I keep the lights on. And if you want more chat, bigger chat, lots more stuff, $2 a month, man. Also, every week I take apart a movie and tell you how to become a better writer by watching TV. So that's always nice. And I've been doing it for years and I love it. But I don't think every writer needs to do it. If you're just getting started and you're just getting started with your first book and you're in your early first draft, I don't think you need to stop and make a Patreon. I think you need to write your first draft. And you can build a smaller community, a more vital nucleus of a community in social media, in a group chat, in a DM thread or something, before you make the jump to a Patreon. Because there's nothing more discouraging than having a thing that you see everybody else doing, but getting nowhere near the results everybody else is getting. It'll end up just being frustrating. So, I don't think it's a requirement. I think it's something that comes later, when you need something more stable, when you know what you're doing and you know how well you can do it and you want to make a concerted effort to get better. But when you're just getting started, I would put the energy and the time and the focus on getting started. Great question. Which leads us to the last two of the night. You know what that means. It's harp time. Gentle advice. Gentle advice number 1. My partner doesn't think he's written a publishable science fiction fantasy manuscript. I want to encourage him to do something with it, but I don't know enough about the next steps. What do I need to know in order to support him? First of all, good job wanting to support your partner. That's awesome. More of that, please. Okay, here are the next steps. I'm going to handle this in 2 ways. I'm going to handle this in terms of your partner wants to traditionally publish it and your partner wants to solo, self-independently publish this. So I'll talk about both of those sets of steps, and then whatever your partner decides they're going to do, that way you'll know how to support them. Let's suppose they're going to traditionally publish first. They want to do that. That means they're going to need to make sure the manuscript is done and polished and it's good enough. And that can take a while. And there will be a lot of temptation to always make one more draft and always make one more fix. And one of the first points of support you can do is tell them that it's good enough, because that validation is going to go a long way. So you want to, step 1, prevent them from constantly tinkering with it for the next 60 years. You got to let them know when it's good enough. And then what they're going to do is they're going to start writing what are called query letters. You've probably heard your partner complain about this on the internet, or you've read about it, or you vaguely have heard about it from movies or television or something. A query letter is basically a text version of a pickup line, so that an agent, and when I say agent, I want you to think about the word pimp. When an agent decides they want to take you under their wing and help you grow your career. So what they're going to do, your partner is going to do, they're going to write this query letter that's going to basically talk a little bit about your book in sort of their book in a provocative way to make it sound appealing, so that somebody can say, yeah, I want more, tell me more. And in fact, tell me more in such a way that it's engaging, so that I want to take 10% of everything you make. And in exchange, I will open doors for you and make it possible for you to do this. And some people somewhere will call it more legit, because hookers on the corner seem to do a lot better with a pimp than when they're out there feeding themselves, right? So they're going to write a query letter. And eventually, that query letter will get rejected until it gets accepted. And then from the accepted point, somebody's going to contact them and offer them a contract. And your next point of support with that contract is going to be, hey, honey, I think we need to get someone else to read this, even if you or your partner have legal experience. You want another person, another human being, preferably a lawyer, to go read this because, well, it has a lot of moving parts. They are often written in obtuse language with vagaries and uncertainties because, frankly, they're looking to control you. They're looking to dictate the terms by which you will do what it is they want you to do, and they are more specifically holding over your head an amount of money. That's called an advance. Now, that advance is generally divided into pieces. The pieces are like this. You're going to get some percentage of this total advance on the day you sign the paperwork. You are going to get some other amount on the day your partner's book is labeled as ready to be published, when it's completed. And then you will get the remainder, or another chunk of it at least, on the day your book is published. And if there's still any money after that, often there is you'll get the remaining percentage when you hit a certain sales point or X number of days after the first day of publication. And what you can do to support your partner in that process is to, rather than tell them, oh my God, honey, this money will change our lives, you're amazing, tell them instead that they're amazing and you're really proud of them and you know the advance isn't a lot of money, but you did great. You're living your dream. Good for you. And then they're going to have to do the job of marketing their work, which is a new level of frustration. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but they have to sell their book. And you can help them and support them by saying, how would you sell the book to me? How would you sell the book to somebody like me? How would you sell the book to the person you want to sell the book to? Ask them questions, help them along. See if they can, if they want your help in coming up with mock-up ads or slogans or catchy little phrases, help them. Help them. Offer to help them. Don't do it for them, but offer to help. And then you will repeat this process, or your partner will repeat this process until they're done having a career. That's traditional publishing. Let's go talk about self-publishing. So we get to cut out the pimp here. We get to cut out the middleman, because your husband is about to become a business unto himself. And I don't mean to say that in terms of like they need to go incorporate or anything, or they need to fill out paperwork with the state or anything like that. But they're about to take on a great deal of smaller responsibilities. They need to become their own publisher. They need to figure out how they want to publish the book. Do they want physical copies or just digital copies? If they're going to get physical copies, we have to talk about shipping and storing and inventory and stuff like that. And if they're going to do digital, that's fine. Got to figure out in what mode or format they're going to make these things. And the first thing you can do to support them, and I'm dead serious when I say this, you can make sure this thing gets professionally edited by another person. I don't care how many people your partner says have read it. I don't care if he's got a critique group already. I don't care if he's got 11 librarian besties who he hangs out with every week. Hire an editor. It will make all the difference in the world. An actual professional Just like you'd want to hire a plumber, just like you'd want to hire a landscaper, just like you'd want to hire somebody to cut your hair. Hire a professional who's trained to edit the book, to get it in its absolute positive best shape. And then from there, support them through that. Because it's frustrating for some people. It's scary. Support will help. And then from there, you're going to want to figure out a cover. Which means looking at artists, figuring out styles, asking questions, trying to figure out what goes on the front of this book. For a lot of writers, that's very nerve-wracking because they really didn't think about it themselves. They were always waiting for a publisher to do it, but now you're the publisher. Well, your partner's the publisher. They need to figure it out on their own. Ask questions. What kind of story is it? What would make you buy a book? Is it the title? Is it the font? Is it the fact that the character doesn't have a hat on? Is it a spaceship? How many planets are on the cover? How many colons and dashes are on the title? Ask about what you picture. Ask them what they picture. You also, partner supporting a writer. What do you picture when you hear your writing partner talk about your book? Figure out what goes on the cover and then look for artists on the internet. Google artists that do those things. There's loads of websites, Pinterest, DeviantArt, stuff like that. And see if they're available. Then they're going to have to hire them. It's expensive. Then when that's done and everybody's happy with it, either you guys or your husband or your partner or whomever can do that layout themselves, or they can farm it out to somebody else. It's, with the right software, it's not difficult. It can be time consuming, but it's not difficult particularly. And then they can turn around and upload it or send it off to a printer and get copies made and go through that. This is an expensive part of the deal. But eventually, once you decide how you're going to distribute it and where it's going and all that, it still turns around and turns into marketing. And we're right back to marketing. Probably the hardest thing to do as a writer, harder than even making the book in the first place, is trying to get other people to buy it. Try to get other people to see that it's a thing they should invest in. And it feels very vulnerable. It feels very naked. It feels very dangerous and hard. And I don't mean that euphemistically. I mean straight up just difficult. Because your partner worked really, really hard on this. Your partner worked super hard, and they put a lot of their heart and soul in this, and they're feeling it's a very personal thing to them, especially if it's their first book. And you want to make sure that their feelings aren't too hurt and that they have a good experience with this so that they don't give up, because this is their dream. This was important to them. And you want to be supportive. So just like we talked about before with marketing, you want to contribute. You want to make sure it's possible. You want to do your part, not only just like, hey, honey, I think that's a really good slogan. I think that's a really good tweet. Put that out. But also do your part to share it. Don't just leave this all on them. And don't, despite all common sense, don't just tell them that they just have to wait, that it's a patience game. We've put the hooks in the water. We have to wait for the fish. There's always hooks to put in the water. There's always another tweet to send. There's always another ad to put out. There's always another marketing thing to do. Managing those expectations and managing that worry goes a long way. So if you want to be a really good supportive partner, the best thing you can do, especially during the marketing stage, is learn to temper we put more hooks out there. Tomorrow, here's the plan for the next day. Here's the plan. Always stick to the plan, have a plan, figure out what the next steps are. That is, bar none, the best supportive advice I can give you. Thank you so much for wanting to support an author in your life. It's tremendous. Thanks. One more. Gentle advice. I received my 110th rejection letter the other day. Should I give up on this book? Do you want to give up on this book? There's no magic amount of rejection letters. You set your own. I know somebody who told me, when I get 100 rejection letters, I'm going to get a tattoo, John. And I thought that was great because, yeah, why not? Get a tattoo. That's cool. I'm down for a tattoo. Good for you. But I think too often the anxiety and pressure of social media and competing in a book productive capitalist neoliberal society has us thinking that more rejection equals less worth. Your book must really be bad if you've been rejected 110 times. That is not a clear comparison. That is not an immediate cause and effect. Because if you're getting rejected over and over, it is possible that your book isn't even getting looked at and your query letter just sucks. You cannot, in the absence of other information, you cannot just assume, well, yeah, the book must be garbage because I get rejected all the time. If your query letter is bad, they haven't read your book. Your manuscript goes unopened, or if it's opened, it's just kind of skimmed because the query letter did not effectively set up expectations or create any interest. That said, it doesn't matter if you've got 1, 11, 100, 110, 200, 500 rejections. If you want to give up, go ahead. But don't use an arbitrary number to justify it. If you want to give up because you're just, I'm done, John. This is too much for me. I didn't think it was going to be this hard. It's fine to give up. Really, it's okay. I'm not going to call you a failure. I'm not going to tell you anything bad about yourself. You're going to do plenty of your own self-harm in that. It's okay if you want to sit down and give up. And it's okay if you want to do that in the short term. Hey, I'm going to take 6 months off, man. I don't know. That's fine. Really, it's okay. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not telling you this in some kind of reverse psychology thing. No, it's straight up okay if you want to walk away. The thing I don't want you to do is give up on the book. Take a break. Tweak the query letter. Talk to somebody about the book. See if you can get help with the book. But don't automatically just throw everything away just because you haven't done everything you could. Yeah, there does get to be a point where it's ridiculous. And you might say to yourself, John, I've done it. I've done everything. Have you? Have you? Really? Or did you only do the things that didn't cost you any money? Or that didn't cost you a lot of money? Or that didn't expose you to somebody else's opinions or judgment or advice or help or time? Because that's not the same thing. And if you, person who asked me this question, answers, I did everything. No, you didn't, because I've never read your book. I'd help you. There's a reason why I offer a free 30-minute conversation so that I can help people who can't otherwise, pay for a whole block of editing or a whole thing of coaching. We can just talk. Loads of people offer that stuff. So no, you haven't done everything. You've just done the stuff that you think you should do. And that's fine, but you're not out of options. You're in charge of how frustrated you get. And I know that seems weird, but legit, you're in charge of that. I don't think you should give up on the book. Take a break, have some tea, relax for a little while, take a couple weeks off, go on vacation, do whatever. But I don't think you should straight give up just because you got 110 rejections. This is not, with the lottery tickets, I used to work at a bodega, and there'd be people who come in with these long ass lists of numbers for the lotto, and they would tell you like, oh, I'm buying $50, $60 worth of pick 3 and pick 4, right? They give you all these whole series of numbers because they had a system. And they were convinced that if they played all 60 something numbers every Tuesday or whatever, that they were guaranteed to win because they had a system. And then when Wednesday would come around and they didn't win jack shit, they would tell you, well, the next one, the next one's my 67th. That'll be the one. It doesn't work like that. Every ticket is an independent purchase. Every rejection is an independent rejection. Just because you got rejected 110 times does not mean your 111th will also be a rejection. It might be the thing they say yes to. There is always a 50-50. They'll reject or they'll say yes. You can improve those odds by writing and crafting a better query to encourage them to say yes. But you can't automatically conclude that by the law of averages, you will always be rejected. Nothing works like that. I don't think you should give up. I don't. I think you need to take a break. I think you need to reorient the personal compass in terms of progress and what you're willing to do. And then I think after that, you'll be in a better position to decide what you want to do after that. But if you're really, absolutely, positively dead set on throwing up your hands, okay, I'm done. Okay, that's all right. You're done. You did the best you could. Cool. And that's fine. But I don't think you should give up right away. I think you're more valuable than that. I think your work has potential more than that. And that's okay. Now, I might be wrong. It's just my opinion. I'm just a guy with a microphone, and what do I know? But I don't think you should automatically give up just because you hit some magic number in rejections. No reason to. Just a gut feeling. Up to you. Good question. And that's it. Are there any outlying questions in any of the chats? Zoom, Twitch, YouTube. Hey. Questions, anyone? Anyone? Else, we will go. Many questions. What are my opinions on publishing digitally, like on Kindle? Kindle's nice. I own a Kindle. I read things on Kindle. It's nice. Their website layout isn't necessarily the best, but the Kindle's nice. Are you saying are you asking if it's viable, or are you just asking my cosmetic opinions on the Paperwhite? If it's viable, yeah, it's viable, but that's sort of like saying everybody runs down Main Street, so I guess I better have things on Main Street. It's not the only way, but they try to position themselves that way because they get a cut of your work, but you don't have to join Main Street in order to do things. It's viable. For the majority of people, it's a reasonably good choice. It's the safest choice for a lot of people, and that's fine. On the topic of rejection, how do you make the anxiety or fears of a character real for readers so that readers feel invested? How do you develop a character flaw or character flaws? You don't need to do all that in a query. If you're talking about just in general in the course of the manuscript, you build a bridge to the reader by making the character feel something that the reader has felt in their lives. So if you have a character who feels afraid of letting down the people who matter to them, you want to find words that help illustrate that point in a way that a reader may have felt that point. You always, or you frequently, not necessarily always, but you frequently want to put your character in a position that the reader may have been in, which means finding words to help illustrate that idea. That's what you want to aim for. That's how you get the reader to invest in the character. Oh, they're like me. I have that feeling. I have that fear. That way, when the character does something truly fantastic that the reader can't do, like cast a spell or, fly a spaceship or something, you still have that positive connected relationship because, yeah, they might fly spaceships or cast spells, but they also don't want to let down the people they care about. You build on common ground. You do that first in a natural voice that sounds comfortable so that the reader can feel like, oh, yeah, that's like a regular person. It just happens to be in a fantastic story. And then you go bring in the hard, like the newer bells and whistles and stuff. How do you develop a character flaw? Depends on the flaw. If this is a big major flaw that we're going to build the story around, it's the flaw they're going to overcome as the purpose of their arc, then you're going to make sure that that flaw is apparent, not necessarily club the reader over the head with it every scene. Oh my God, there's this. Oh my God, there's this. Oh my God, there's this. But you want to make it apparent that the character is motivated to overcome it. And it makes all the difference. Oh, there's gunfire and fireworks outside. How exciting for us all. I'm so glad you have many questions. I am happy to answer them. How do you make I get what you're saying, to make the anxiety feel real, but you need to be able to express that realness in your own words. Your ability to do that, rather than make it feel art manufactured, is going to absolutely help you accomplish that. Because that's what the reader is looking for. They're looking for their experience translated in your fiction. I'm going to open Accept Obscurity's book. I know your parents didn't name you that. I hope your parents didn't name you that. Maybe they did. I do know somebody named Feather, so I am not one to talk. But, I'm going to open this person's book, and even though it's a story about totally not my life, I want to find some element in this story that I can say, yeah, that's a lot like me. Whatever it might be. It might be something big. It might be something small. But once I build that bridge, once I can say, I have this in common with some part of this story, I have invested. And then the more things I can find, the better the investment. And the clearer I can say, yes, that is totally what I feel, the better the investment. That's not necessarily, oh, that character is scared of clowns the way I'm scared of clowns. Sure, for some people, that's fine. That's exactly it. Also, clowns are weird. But that's not the only way I build an investment. That's not the only way I connect. But as a writer, you should be always looking to use your skills with language in such a way as to connect to other people with their understanding of language. Because you're trying to put a movie in their brains. So don't just think, I have a huge CGI budget. Think, I have their undivided attention. How am I going to use it so that everybody has a good time here? Excellent questions. Anybody else? Else? If you have other questions, ask them. Else, we will go to the outro. All right. We're going to the outro. Boom. Outro. Let's go. Wow. It was a heck of a night. It was great. Thanks for letting me talk about structure and transitions and Westerns and Othello and Patreon and Warhammer, because, and rejection letters and partner support and everything in between. Thanks for asking great questions, you guys. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. As always, you guys continue to save my life each and every week. Thanks for being here. Hell of a week. The next time we will talk, at least the next time we will have this chat, let's put it that way. The next time I will see you for this chat will be on next Wednesday, July the 28th. However, the next time I will see you here on Twitch will be Monday the 26th. I don't know what we're doing yet. To find out what we're going to do, you probably want to ask me on Twitter, twitter.com/awesomejohn, awesome, AWESOME _, that's shift in the dash key, JOHN, awesome_John on Twitter. Or jump into the Patreon, get the link to the Discord, hang out, and you can watch me go through the entire thought process of what we're going to talk about on Monday. Until then, I love you. You're great people. Take good care of yourself. Make good choices. I believe in you. When you think no one else does, I am right there believing in you. The revolution is coming, brothers and sisters. All power to all people. I don't think I have a Twitter command. I should put one in. I'll do that for Monday. I promise. I love you. I needed this. I hope you did too. Heck of a night. Heck of a night. Let's get out of here. See ya!